Hello, Randy. Welcome. And today I'm a big fan of you. Thank you so much for being here. You are Captain America, Randy, the natural couture. Thank you for being here.
Pleasure, MD. It's good to see you. Thanks for having me on, buddy.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I'm a big fan, but for people who don't know you, if you wanna tell them a little bit about you.
Sure. I grew up in Seattle, Washington. I started wrestling at the age of 10. Wrestled all through school. Wrestled for the United States Army. I spent 6 years in the U.S. Army. It was as a soldier that I qualified for the Olympics the first time, and ultimately that led me to a college scholarship at Oklahoma State, where I wrestled for 4 years after my time in the Army. Um, I ended up at Oregon State, where I was the assistant wrestling coach for about 7 years until I started fighting. I made my way on a whim into mixed martial arts. Back then, we called it no holds barred, NHB. My very first fight was UFC 13, and that was in May of 1997. And I ended up fighting professionally for 14 years. I retired from fighting in 2011.
Okay.
Fought Lyoto Machida up in Toronto, Canada for that last fight. It was about 55,000 people there. It was a pretty crazy night.
Wow.
Obviously, that fight didn't go my way, but I'd already made the decision to retire, win, lose, or draw in that fight. It was time to move on. I ended up getting a chance to act in a movie in the early 2000s called Cradle to the Grave.
Okay.
And that kind of opened the door for me to potentially pursue acting at some point. Obviously, at that time, I was still fighting in the early 2000s. I fought till 2011. So nothing got in the way of fights. I did do some movies in that stretch of time, but I worked them in around the fights and fight camps. Now, obviously, since retiring in 2011, I can pursue acting and all the other business adventures that I started while I was fighting full time. And so that's basically what I do now. I run a couple of foundations, one called the Extreme Couture GI Foundation for Wounded Combat Veterans. The other one, we run the Nevada chapter for MVP, Emerging Vets and Players, out of the gym at Extreme Couture. Those are obviously very near and dear to me, something that I'm proud to be involved with because of my time in the Army in the 80s. Now getting a chance to give back to some of these men and women that are putting their butts on the line since the 9/11 incident and the war on terror.
Yeah.
Between that and some of the business ventures that I have still going and chasing acting jobs, it keeps me pretty busy. So,
Yeah. Wow. Wow. Thank you for your service. Thank you for helping, giving back, your fight, your foundation, what you're doing for the veterans. Thank you so much for that. So I look on YouTube. No, on Google. I don't know if you Google yourself. When I Google Randy Couture, Randy Couture have more than 13 million results. You know, like this is just to showcase everything you have done, and you have your Wikipedia here. I don't know if you like what they what they write in here, but they have good profile of you. So and then I have your website here, where the website actually is a great website. It just showcase your career. So just um just to follow what you have here on your bio. So how do you become the natural? Why do you call yourself the natural, and how did you become the natural?
well, my very first UFC was UFC 13, where I won the heavyweight tournament. I fought twice that night, and that put me in line for a super fight in the very next UFC show, which was UFC, I guess 14. It didn't really have a number, but I fought Vitor Belfort, and I was already 34 years old. Most people thought I was going to get my butt whooped by this young, 19-year-old kid that's been tearing everybody up.
So you
I ended
started
up,
at the UFC at in your 30s.
Yeah, I didn't start fighting till I was 33, almost 34.
Wow.
And I fought Vitor when I was 34. That was October of 97. And, I don't think anybody thought I was going to be able to beat him. And I knew if I could get my hands on him and make him wrestle me as much as possible, I had a good shot at beating him. And so I practiced a lot on closing the distance and tying him up. Obviously, in that fight, dirty boxing and that tactic or technique was born. Joel Gold was kind of the only guy running a magazine that covered our sport. It was called Full Contact Fighter Magazine.
Okay.
And it was kind of a newspaper quality. You had a colored cover, but the rest of it was like reading the newspaper. It wasn't a traditional magazine. But Joel wanted to interview me after that first Vitor Belfort fight, and he's the one that coined the phrase, "Hey, you naturally adapted to his style. Can I call you the natural?" And I was like, "Well, I've been called a lot worse things, so I suppose that's fine." And that's where the nickname came from. So
Wow.
it kind of stuck. He called me the natural in that article in Full Contact Fighter magazine, and it just kind of stuck. So I've been called a lot worse.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Actually, that's a good explanation because I watch a lot of your videos on YouTube, and then they're always announcing, Randy the natural, when you're coming in. You have all people shouting, but yeah. So then you went up to be MMA champion, six-time UFC champion, right?
Yeah, that first title fight was right after that Vitor Belfort fight. The winner of that fight got a shot at the title, which was going to happen in Yokohama, Japan. So my first title fight was December of 1997 against Maurice Smith. And Maurice had just beaten Mark Coleman to take the title. Mark is somebody that I knew from the wrestling world for sure. He was a freestyle silver medalist, wrestled at Ohio State, where he was a national champion in collegiate wrestling. So I knew Mark well, and I knew that Maurice was going to be a big challenge. A very, very good kickboxer. That was my first time to Japan. Fought in Yokohama right before Christmas. It was an amazing trip, and that was my first world championships in mixed martial arts. So certainly a milestone for me in a lot of ways. But it was a fun one. The Japanese crowd and the Japanese, they love our sport. Bushido is part of their culture, and they're a lot different than the American fans for sure. It's quiet as can be in that arena. You can almost hear a pin drop in there. It's so quiet. And
Wow.
they ooh and ah and clap, but they don't get rabid and crazy like the American fans do. It's a little bit different environment.
Wow. So what is take to be six-time champions? Like, how do you keep coming back, coming back?
Well,
Um,
I think, a lot of people talk about winning 6 world championships. And in my mind, that's great, but that means I lost it at least 5 times, right? And the truth
but
is I lost it all 6 times. But championship spirit in my mind is not about winning all the time. It's about how you deal with the adversity of losing and picking yourself back up, sorting it out, figuring out what you did wrong, how you can go back and do better, and putting yourself back out there, not being afraid to lose, not being afraid to put it on the line. And I tried to emulate that model or that model. It was the worst thing that ever happens to you, is you lose a fight in life. You're doing pretty damn good. So
mhm.
I was in a pretty volatile